So we'll get started here. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Jeffrey Bunkowski. He's going to be presenting for us this afternoon.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your morning, afternoon, or evening from wherever you may be joining us to be part of this presentation. As she said, my name is Jeff Bonkowski, and today we're going to be talking about fire prevention and exposure prevention in oil and gas. To give you a little bit of my background, I'm the Western North America area manager. My territory is everything west of the Mississippi, U.S. and Canada. A little of my background, I was retired fire captain, hazmat specialist, and after retiring, I started doing consulting work, of all things, with the ethanol industry and trying to find solutions for today high hazard fires, thinking the 21st century. I started again changing and shifting and looking for better ways to deal with some of these fires that could make the firefighting profession safer. And in doing so, I came across hazard control technologies and the product that we're going to be kind of talking about for use in the hazards that I just mentioned for this presentation. So again, I hope, again, this presentation gets you, get some thoughts going, get some thinking going on, and again, how we can continue to make firefighting and dealing with some of these high hazard fires safer. So when we sit there and start going and looking at hazard control technologies, it's not a new company. It's not a product that has just come to the market to meet a need. F500 has been around for 29 years. So 1997, the agent was introduced to the market. As we sit there, we start looking through the growth. We are now on 6 continents. So we've got a lot of coverage around the world. And in another area, again, growing concern in many areas, and we talk about is lithium-ion batteries. It's F500 is probably the most tested product when it comes to dealing with that hazard. It's been tested for 17 years to find it to be very successful for that hazard. So now I'm hoping to get people to think, hey, let's start looking at, again, another area that this product can be very, very successful and helpful in being able to provide protection and hopefully even prevention when we start talking about it. So when we look at, the past years, excuse me, we see that when we start looking at refineries and, hey, look at just Monday, there in Port Arthur, Texas, we had an incident that took place, but we see that we're starting to have these growing explosions, fires that are occurring at our refineries in different areas in the country. We see that in 2023, there were 96 recorded petrochemical incidents, and it rose from 96 to 132 in 2024. So, our refineries are getting older, and as they get older, maintenance is being done on them. But again, there's still these facilities are getting older and older, and we're starting to see some failures. So how can we work to better protect these facilities from explosions that take them offline? So we look at hey, some incidents that took place, the Chevron in El Segundo, California, where there was a fire leading with some jet fuel that had an impact in the supply. HF Sinclair Navajo in Mexico had an explosion fire that led to injuries of 3. In Chevron and Pascagoula, Mississippi, we had some contract workers, again, some more serious injuries leading to hospitalization. And then we've got an overturned tanker. And, this is one that took place in Nigeria. And I'm going to do a little bit of a case history on this one because, again, we're sitting there now, we're watching the price of gasoline and fuels go up. And as it does, people are finding it a little more difficult to be able to maybe purchase or buy gasoline to fill up their tanks. And, we look at, previous years when we've had these types of incidents, and what do people do? They go out, maybe they start to siphon gas out of vehicles. They find ways that, they can get some fuel. And the reason why I want to bring up this case history in Nigeria is because here we have a incident that took place where, a tanker truck was traveling down the road. And as you'll hear, had some mechanical difficulties. It was pulling off to the shoulder. The road was kind of in disrepair. It was a tandem. That was a tank, and the pump tank looks like it tipped over, spilled over, spilling some fuel out. So just as a lead into the story, let's look at this report that came from this particular incident.
From our studio in Lagos, Nigeria, this is TVC News at 12. Following the tragic tanker explosion in Niger, the state government says it will set up a mechanism to enforce roadworthiness of articulated vehicles in order to avert a recurrence of such tragic incidents. Chanami Bameyi has details in this report.
The death toll from the tragic tanker explosion in Niger State has risen to 98. Many of the severely wounded have been transferred to teaching hospitals in Gwagwalada and Jabi for specialized care. Signs of devastation are still very visible as traders continue to count their losses. Eyewitnesses say security agencies attempted to prevent people from scooping fuel moments before the fire broke out.
In the aftermath of this tragic event, traders are counting their losses. Items worth millions of naira have been lost. But here's actually what caused this incident. Eyewitnesses say that this tanker had pulled over to fix a mechanical fault, but it tipped over and fell on this bad portion of the road. This road must be properly fixed because it's a major route that connects Niger State and Kaduna, and also the Federal Capital Territory.
For we that get shops here, we try to run and escape, leave the place. But some people from other places begin to come with different things, packing the foil, doing one thing or the other. Then I try to lock my own place here. I say, oh, this kind of thing can escalate fire, so there is no point of staying here. So we was here and people was gathering here. Some security men came, they tried to save the situation, chase people away. They overpowered them. There was nothing they can do.
Mine, because of our goods, my generator, everything did here. All the things we I gather in my life, doors, everything, I did here. I didn't know what to do.
So, sadly, here we have a case history where, hey, this tanker truck tipped over, fuel began leaking. People came with jugs, pans, whatever that they could to collect the fuel that was leaking. And unfortunately, there was an ignition and a fire that, as we see here, killed 98 plus people and sent many, many more to the hospital. So very unfortunate. So we see that, as people start getting in and, the cost of fuels go up, people get desperate, in order to be able to put gas in maybe a generator or their vehicle so they can get to work. So, we look at the aftermath. It talks about, again, the people involved, burned so badly, it was beyond recognition. Unfortunately, this is a very sad event, and something that can be, with the use of an encapsulator agent, the F500, and being able to encapsulate the leaking fuels, being able to work to keep that scene safe and to prevent a fire or explosion from occurring until maybe a plug or a solution to patch the holes can be made, or the tank can be offloaded and left successfully inerted. But, these are some things that I'm hoping that we can sit there and we can talk about as we continue on, and I'll show as we continue to go on through the presentation. So as we go through, I want to talk about there we go. excuse me, I want to talk about some other instances that have made the headlines here recently. And this is within the last years or so. The Morning Midas, which was a ship that was basically transporting vehicles, gasoline and electric vehicles. It also was carrying fuels. It again caught fire because of we're assuming some batteries that might have started. The crew worked to try to extinguish the fire unsuccessfully, and the fire grew. The crew abandoned ship safely, and the ship eventually sunk into the water. So we look at another here in Malaysia, a pipeline incident where it ignited, injuring 150 people. We look again around the world, and we're seeing multiple instances, sometimes a year, where we have incidents that involve pipelines. Cargo ship striking a jet fuel tanker, triggering a fire here in the UK in the North Sea. Again, we have a large fire and a spill causing an environmental impact. And now we get into some current events. I shouldn't say current, it's been ongoing, but you have the Russian-Ukraine war, and we're starting to hear and see that they are targeting refineries and fuel areas in Russia. And even now in the Middle East, we have some things that are taking place, including the Straits of Hormuz, where tanker ships are being attacked. And again, it's leading to a huge environmental issue that, again, let's see how we can maybe address and deal with those. And I'll get into a case history as we go through, again, dealing with a tanker ship. But, let's look at some of the consequences that we're dealing with. I've showed how with some of these incidents that we have case histories on, leading to injuries, fatalities, and damage. When we sit there and start looking, what kind of impact does that have to the community as far as economics? You start getting into having to evacuate people, shelter them in place, whatever it might be. You get into the business interruption or the loss of revenue and market share. And those are key, because if you can look at, the case histories with these refineries where they have an explosion or a fire that takes them off a line, possibly for weeks or months, or depending on the extent of the damage, maybe even years. If there could be a system that could be activated that could maybe eliminate those vapors from finding an ignition source and preventing that, while maybe safety devices take place and shut the vapors down or the leaks down, and and that explosion or fire could be eliminated. Again, the downtime would be greatly reduced. Now all we need to do is repair what failed, and we're back operational. It's not we have to repair and rebuild an entire section of a refinery. We also then look at, if we do have those explosions and fires and we start getting into fire operations, the environmental impact. Again, it's not only from the toxic soot and smoke that we're having people shelter in place or evacuating downwind for, but again, when we look at the firefighting efforts, if we're using fluorinated foams yet, because we're near salt water, because the fluorine-free foams do not work with salt water. So we're still going to have to use the fluorinated foams, the AFFFs. But we're looking at the pollution that we're causing, and the fines that are going to be following those. We look at the class action lawsuits because of the fact that people are being displaced. They want to be compensated. And then, your insurance, when the insurance companies have to pay out these hefty fines, or they have to pay out these large settlements, they're going to be a little bit leery to continue with the insurance, or if they do, your insurance rates are going to be extremely more expensive. And again, we start looking at the damage to the reputation within the community, and so on. So I want to just show a real quick video to introduce you here to an encapsulator agent. and then we'll talk about it a little bit more after this video.
Encapsulator technology, the next generation of fire and hazard mitigation. First, we start with a simplified version of a single encapsulator agent molecule consisting of a hydrophilic polar head which loves water, dissolves in water, and a hydrophobic nonpolar tail which fears water and will do anything to get away from water. Once the EA molecules enter the water, they instantaneously and automatically orient with the nonpolar tails inward and the polar heads outward, forming millions of spherical micelles. Micelles travel towards and exit the nozzles, forming EA droplets. Micelles nearest to the surface of each droplet automatically break apart. The nonpolar tails orient outside the droplet, with polar heads on the surface, forming an EA skin on the surface of every droplet. In addition to the EA skin, there are millions of molecular spherical micelles within each droplet.
Oh, sorry. This is the key to understand. What I want you to do is I want you to understand this particular slide. This is probably the most important part of this animation, this video that I just showed. Understanding how an encapsulator agent is different from foam. And we're going to get into that a lot more, but I want you to, again, and I'm going to refer back to this particular slide in this particular video as I continue on with the presentation. The big thing is that we need to understand is that the encapsulator agents fall under NFPA 18A, where foam is under NFPA 11. An encapsulator agent is under NFPA 18A. And I want to caution, because again, we start to see a lot of people, a lot of products starting to use the term encapsulator or encapsulation in their description of how they work. But if you're looking at a true encapsulator agent that does meet the NFPA 18A standard, we need to go to section 7.7 and look at this test. This is the spherical micelle stability test. So again, remember the spherical micelle we just saw in the previous video. It's not a bubble. I'm chemically changing the makeup of that water droplet, and now how that water droplet is going to be able to cool and extinguish and deal with these flammable liquids and gases. So as we continue on, I want to now start again. Let's start talking and doing a little bit of the foam versus the encapsulator agent. When we talk about the foams, again, we need to look at the fact that they make a bubble. They work on a mechanical basis. They cause a separation of the fuel and the oxygen, so they work on a two-dimensional basis. And if we go into the NFPA 11 standard and look at Annex A11 of the standard, it even states that foam is not suitable for three-dimensional flowing liquid fuel fires or gas fires. Right in the standard. But in many cases where we start looking at foam classes and teaching about foams and things like that, they really don't mention that part of the NFPA 11 standard. We see when we start fighting these three-dimensional fires that we start going into a powdered agent or a secondary agent to assist with the three-dimensional aspects. Because again, foam is not suitable for those three-dimensional aspects of a fire. Now, when we move over and start looking at an NFPA 18A encapsulator agent, the F500, we do and are able to work on those three-dimensional aspects of a fire. We also look at the fact that, it's an all hazards extinguishing agent. We look at it, in the standard, it talks about class A, class B. It has some information on class C, talks about class D fires. And now we look at, other parts of the world coming up and developing a lithium ion standard, a class L. Hopefully we'll be adopting that in the US soon, but here we have an encapsulator agent that I mentioned at the very beginning, 17 years of testing on this particular hazard as well. So we see that this is an all hazards extinguishing agent. Now in this video, it's going to show you, again, this isn't the 7.7 test, but it's got an idea of what the 7.7 test is. I'll let the video play and then again answer or talk a little bit about it.
Is an encapsulator agent. First, a gallon of gasoline is poured into the pan. Next, 16 ounces of F500EA is mixed with the gas. The test requires at least 5 gallons of water to complete to 1:8:40 ratio. 1 part F500, 8 parts fuel, and 40 parts water. It is important to note that more water can be added, but the test requires at least 5 times more water than fuel. The mixture is left to sit for 1 minute to ensure that the air bubbles can dissipate and the test fuel can be totally encapsulated. After 1 minute, the test requires that a lit torch can be run over the surface of the test fuel and produce no combustion, therefore rendering the fuel non-flammable and totally encapsulated. The test also requires that the test fuel sits for at least 2 hours and then be tested again. This proves the fuel is totally encapsulated and non-flammable. F500EA is unlike foam. There is no blanket to break. The fuel is totally encapsulated, making it non-flammable and non-ignitable. The test fuel can be used to extinguish this burning pile of tires. This shows that it is truly encapsulated, and F500EA has done.
So you can see how an encapsulator agent works. Okay, the encapsulator agent isn't again like a foam where it floats on the surface, creating a separation from the fuel and oxygen. This is a through and through mixture. Okay, the gasoline is now encapsulated within that solution. And best part, just to give you an idea, if we allow that to evaporate away, at the end, there will be no fuel left behind. So if this was on a road surface or a highway, it was a spill and we used encapsulator agent to, again, do the mitigation. We used it and LEL meters to monitor to make sure that we had 0 LEL, to make certain that we had that true encapsulation of the fuel. We can allow that solution to evaporate, and when it again evaporated, there is no fuel left behind. It's gone. So your environmental cleanup has been taken care of. And I will mention that the F500 encapsulator agent is on the US EPA's National Contingency Plan as a surface washing agent for these types of hazards. So we're going to get in and do again some comparisons. We're going to talk about foams, how foams are a reactive response. We have to pretty much wait till something happens before it's useful. About the only thing that we can say maybe might be a little bit proactive is if we have a spill and we apply a blanket to hopefully suppress vapors so they don't find an ignition source. But other than that, in most cases, our foams are reactive to something that's occurred. Unfortunately, we're still trying to use foams to extinguish three-dimensional fires. And as I said, foams are not suitable. So we look at, again, the versatility, again, the flammable hazards. We look at the new foams, the fluorine-free foams, which in application can require anywhere to 1.5 to 3 times or more of the foam in order to be able to extinguish the same types of fires that the AFFF used to. Again, the fluorine-free foams do not work with salt water. They're freshwater use only. So we start getting, around the Gulf, we start getting into offshore rigs and things like that. We've got some issues. We still need to use those fluorinated foams, again, causing environmental issues. And again, if it's a carcinogen, what are we doing to those that are applying and using it? Look at life safety, unable to mitigate explosive toxic environments. So we've got those combustible flammable vapors building, waiting to see if that air fuel mixture gets just right, finds an ignition source. we have that explosion, foams aren't going to help us. Same with water. Water might help a little bit. We might be able to push some of the vapors around, preventing them from accumulating, but still, they really do very little to nothing. When we look at trying to extinguish some of these fires with just plain water, again, we get into that term copious amounts. We're going to need a lot of water to be able to deal with these types of hazards. And again, it's only going to address that flammability, and it's a reactive response. When we talk about using F500 encapsulator agents, now we can talk about being proactive as well as reactive. We can, as I said earlier, we have monitoring taking place, watch LELs starting to build, systems get activated so that we now can encapsulate those flammable combustible vapors, eliminating them so that safety devices can be put in place and preventing that fire or explosion from ever happening. Again, when we sit there, we start looking at these alarm systems and things. What are they for? Right now, in refineries, if anything, they're to warn people to basically evacuate because there could be an impending fire or disaster that's getting ready to take place. So people need to evacuate areas as quickly as possible. Well, these alarms now, they would still be a warning for people to evacuate, but with the activation of an encapsulator system, it can make that much safer with hopefully the elimination of that chance for an explosion or fire from ever occurring. We can look at also the toxic hazards. Again, if I'm able to encapsulate those fuels, encapsulate those vapors, and when they evaporate, that toxic hazard or that flammable gas or liquid's gone, again, I've made that scene much safer. And when we look at testing that's taken place, we're needing or requiring about 60% less water. So again, if I'm using that much less water, what kind of environmental impact do you think I am having? I'm greatly reduced compared to using a foam or using plain water. And as I've mentioned multiple times, and I'll continue, that ability to remove the toxins from the environment. I want to show a video here. Again, it's going to show some
blowing liquid fuel fire on a jet engine cowling. After the jet fuel was ignited, a mixture of salt water and 3% F500 encapsulator agent was used with a 1.5-inch hand line and 95 GPM nozzle and eductor. The fire was extinguished in 23 seconds. Notice the fuel continues to flow after the fire was extinguished. F500EA cooled the jet cowling, removing the heat, and encapsulated the fuel. Foam cannot fight this type of fire. NFPA 11 Annex A11 states foam is not suitable.
So I wanted to show that video because a couple things. One of the very first things that was said was that was being used was salt water. Okay, so here's a great example showing that the effectiveness of F500 in salt water is fine. We're not going to be our effects aren't going to be reduced. I'm using salt water. As you can see, he said it was a 95 gallon per minute nozzle, so they weren't using mass quantities of water. But understand there's two things taking place because that steel is a reignition source. If we don't cool that steel down below the auto ignition temperature, okay, we are going to continually be trying to extinguish the fire until we do get that metal down below. The ability of the encapsulator agent to rapidly cool is tremendous. We can take temperatures of metals and things that are in excess of 1,000 degrees and drop it down to 100 degrees in a matter of seconds. Okay, with that rapid cooling, now he's able to eliminate that reignition source, then work on the flammable vapors and the gases and the fuels that were still being released and extinguish that fire. And as you can see, he did it rather rapidly within a matter of just a few seconds. Now I'm going to get into another case history. This is involving, because I mentioned earlier, with all the tankers that are being attacked right now, this is a case history. Again, it was also a ship that had been attacked by the Houthis back in August of 24. It was a Greek flagged oil tanker called Soul Union, and it was carrying 1 million barrels of crude oil. Excuse me. All the crew members of this ship, I will say, were safely evacuated. But, let's look at what happened. The vessel was targeted by the Houthis. It was attacked. The Houthis then boarded the ship, set off some other explosives, and caused multiple fires and breaches of deck plating. Due to the fact that there was 150,000 tons of crude oil, which was significantly more than the Exxon Valdez, as you see here, the concerns for a structural failure were great. And if it had failed, the resulting massive environmental disaster that would have led to. So, as we said, all of the crew had been safely evacuated. And because of the fact that, we were concerned about this environmental impact, decisions were made to work to salvage and see if they couldn't get this ship towed away from where it was to a place a little bit safer. And with the naval escorts, they began to work with Ambipar, who was a contractor that was familiar with shipboard firefighting, marine firefighting, and had the capabilities to deal with these types of large-scale incidents. Ambipar, by chance, happened to be an encapsulator F500 user because they had been using it to deal with coal fires on ships that were bringing coal and other supplies to Europe. So because of their familiarity, they started asking the question of, well, if it's so great on coal, how would it work with petroleums? And so we started to educate the members of Ambipar on how effective the encapsulator agent is. The F500 would be on being able to deal with this. Again, we think about that rapid cooling. What do we have? A lot of steel on a ship. It's a reignition source. We have to cool that steel down below the auto ignition temperature. Our efforts are futile because we can put the fire out, but that heat of the steel is just going to reignite it. So again, we started to explain that to them. And so off they got 16,000 liters that they brought to the scene, and they began their firefighting. And within a matter of weeks, they were able to have basically a huge impact. They extinguished all the fires. They were doing it in conjunction with nitrogen. What they would do is they would use nitrogen to help get into the holes and start to purge the atmosphere, while they use the F500 to the flammable vapors, and the fires themselves, as well as cooling the steel. And the reason why we sit there and we start saying that it took 3 weeks to extinguish this particular ship was because they only worked at night. Because of the heat of the day and because of the heat of the ship and the fires that were burning on it, during the daytime hours, it was just too hot to have people out there trying to be working that aggressively. So all of these efforts were done in the evening hours when the temperatures were a little bit cooler. So as you can see here, from the pictures, we have a ship that's got some relatively large fires that are burning, and you look now in a matter of 3 weeks, all of these fires were safely extinguished. But the amazing part is let's look at what the original load was. Here we have 150 tons of oil. They estimated that only 6,000 tons of the oil burned over the 3-week period, and that they were able to save 140 or a little more than 140,000 tons of the oil. So it was very successful in being able to extinguish this ship. So again, this is the first, but it just shows that, again, we have a company that asked the questions, how would this work? And used it very successfully with great results. And again, everybody went home safe. There were no injuries, no other problems that occurred. So let's again talk about these comparisons. Okay, when we sit there and start looking at the standards, your foams, they meet the NFPA 11 foam standard. And if you're using a good quality foam, you're going under the mil spec. foam test, okay? So that you know that you've got a good quality, or hopefully a good quality foam. I mentioned again early on when we talk about an encapsulator agent, we want to make sure we have a good quality, or we do have a true encapsulator agent. Ask the questions, can it pass NFPA 18A Section 77 testing? Foams cannot prevent those environmental disasters. I'm going to get into it, talk a little bit about an incident as we go on. When we start talking about disaster prevention a little later into the presentation, but I'm going to mention how F500 can actually help prevent an environmental issue or disaster. We look at the versatility. Again, the agents, as far as foam, they only are able to adjust the flammability. They have to have, again, mechanical basis causing the separation of fuel and oxygen. Where encapsulator agents, we're able to mitigate the explosive flammable and encapsulate those fuels. As long as we hit that formula, remember the 1-840 formula. If we have a vapors, again, being able to just flow the F500 solution into the environment, encapsulating those flammable combustible vapors, we can hopefully prevent those fires and explosions from occurring. Working on those three-dimensional aspects that the foams cannot work on. And as I said earlier, we're going to talk a lot more about the environmental impacts between the PFAS foams and the biodegradable, non-corrosive, non-toxic encapsulator agent. So when we sit there and we start looking at protecting oil and gas with F500, we see, all of these different areas, how we can sit there and work around tanks and mobile equipment, things like that. When I talk about, again, the environment and how we can prevent these disasters, I'm getting into this point here, and the reason why I wanted to wait is, we see the offshore rig. There's also a case history that we have in Nigeria again that dealt with an offshore well. It had caught fire, and basically the efforts were made to extinguish this particular well head with foam, and they had spent weeks with the crews that were familiar with dealing with these types of fires and were unsuccessful at being able to extinguish this particular wellhead. Again, a three-dimensional fire out offshore. Our Nigerian distributor, he then got together a group of firefighters that had absolutely zero experience with wildfires. This was their first fire. They got themselves a ship. They got some F500 solution pre-mixed, some fire pumps, and off they went to go and extinguish this wildfire. And they did. In 7 minutes, they were able to extinguish this wellhead. That weeks and weeks of application of foam were unable to extinguish. They were able to, with F500, extinguish in 7 minutes. Now, when I mentioned the environmental impact, and I was going to talk about it, is that after the fire was extinguished, the environmental ministry of Nigeria, they got on board ships and they started to go along the coastline to tour the coastline. And they were in awe. They were shocked because in past experiences, when they've dealt with and they've extinguished these wellheads with foam, there's always a huge environmental impact, a huge cleanup that needed to take place along the shoreline. And when they used the F500 on this particular wellhead and extinguished it, and they did the tour of the shoreline to try to estimate what the cost of cleanup was going to be, there was nothing. There was nothing that needed to be cleaned up. So again, understanding how F500 works on these types of things, again, and being able to help mitigate and being able to prevent environmental disasters from occurring. Again, it can be almost another webinar all by itself. So we sit there and start looking at detection. We've actually partnered with Smart LX by Embedded Logic. when it comes to being able to create devices or look at partnering up and doing gas detection, vapor detection, to make certain that we've got that 24/7 protection, and that systems can be activated to provide the protection for refineries or tank farms or loading stations for fuel tankers, etc. We've got that all taken care of. Excuse me, weather alert. So we get into now some other ways. We look at fixed systems. We look at here we have a concentrate control tank that we have for fire sprinkler systems, again, that are compliant with NFPA 18A. We also look at our diamond dosers. Our diamond dosers, again, are probably for larger systems that can, again, help to address and do applications for multiple and for some large applications. And then we're getting into the water mist systems. So we have various water mist systems that are either high pressure or low pressure, but they can be designed for applications and needs that you might have. We look at some mobile equipment. We have trailers that carry totes. We have trailers that have actual poly tanks that carry 500 or 600 gallons of concentrate. We've got our small carts, and then we have our wheeled extinguishing units. So we do have various ways to assist and help in getting the encapsulator agent to the scene and to help provide the protection. Getting towards the end, what I'd like to do now is leave this slide up here for just a minute. This is, again, some trainings or some webinars that are going to be coming up here in the future. Feel free to go ahead and scan the code and sign up for any or all of the upcoming videos. And with that, I will go ahead and I'm going to come back to the slide. But again, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, feel free to call, email. You can call our number here at the 770-719-5112, or you can go info@hct-world.com. I'll be more than happy to answer or again, work with you to set up additional training, do lunch and learns. Again, feel free to ask some questions and go on. But I'm going to go back to this slide and leave it here so that if you are interested in any of these, you can go ahead and sign up for them. And with that, I'm going to go ahead here and open up and look at the chat and see if we can't answer your questions. I do apologize for that video that didn't play through with the animation, but again, the main point of that animation was the fact that we need to understand how F500 chemically changes the makeup of a water droplet. It isn't a bubble structure like we see with foam. Let me see. Okay, if we do have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat, or I'm not sure, Esther, Heather, if you've got some.
I'm not seeing anything come through just yet.
Okay. Again, feel free if you have any questions, more than happy to answer them and make sure that you do have an understanding of how this can be beneficial to the safety of refineries in the petroleum industry. Mhm. I see a question about, is F500 agent certified and tested? If yes, by who? It is an NFPA approved. We do have NFPA 18A. So it is under, and I believe we do also have the UL certifications. So we do have certifications for the product. It has been tested. Again, as I said, the product has been around for 29 years. So I oftentimes when I'm doing some of these presentations, I'll throw out there when we look at, these new foams. If we think back when the AFFFs were first introduced, we were always told that they were safe, and we learned many years later that they weren't, that they did have that forever chemical that would cause some health effects or environmental effects that are basically now we find out are considered the forever chemical. Who knows what's in these new fluorine-free foams? What's to say, again, we're being told they're safe, but 29 years from now, are we going to be able to say the same thing? F500 has been around for 29 years. It's been extensively used around the world, as I said, 6 continents. It's been used to help protect forest fires in the Amazon rainforest. Probably one of the most monitored ecosystems in the world without any adverse effects. So environmentally, we can see that, the product has been around. We're not hearing any thing as far as health effects, environmental effects, or otherwise. Yeah, the product is great for so many things. Okay. Greg, I see Brian at why has the product been adopted so much for lithium-ion and the petroleum markets here in Australia? Yeah, again, I think when you sit there and start looking at, various countries that are looking to find environmentally friendly ways to deal with the hazards, they're doing testing, and they are finding out that the encapsulator agent F500 is very, very effective and safe to be able to deal with the lithium ion and the petroleum hazards. As I said earlier in the presentation, 60% less water in most cases. If the main part is that it takes training. We've had foam for years and years and years, and we've trained with it quite a bit. Now we have an encapsulator agent in that's coming to become more widely used. And if we use the product like we would use foam, we're going to use a lot of it. I'll admit it. We need to do training so that we're applying the product correctly. And if we are applying the product correctly, you'll greatly reduce the amount of water that you use. And I've often said that, you start looking at, areas that, have basically drought conditions that don't have large quantities of water that they have at their their beck and call. We're trying to find ways that we can make a small amount of water go a long way. And by adding in the addition of an encapsulator agent, the F500 into the water, we can make 1,000 gallons seem like it's 10,000 gallons. So again, the main thing is how we apply it, proper application, and that comes with training. We need to work and in many cases with our distributor network here in the United States and hopefully other parts, the biggest thing that I tell and explain to a lot of fire departments is I don't want you to buy the product if you're not going to get the training. Because if you misuse the product, again, it's not going to work for you. Yes, it does have F500 is UL. It does carry a UL listing. Again, you can shoot an email. We'll gladly share those with you. As far as being suitable for cold climates, well, it does freeze. Again, it is a water additive, so it does freeze. We do have in applications where it's put in fire extinguishers, we do have some information on antifreezes that can be used with the extinguishers. Again, we'd be glad to share with you as well. Is the test certification easily available online? I don't believe we have those online, but again, you can contact HCT and or any of our MSRs, and we'll be more than happy to share those with you. Is F500 suitable for Class L fires? Yes, it is. Again, as I said, when it comes to Class L fires, testing started with F500 back in 2008 with Bosch, completing in 2009. So we've got about 17, 18 years of testing with F500s on Class L fires with very, very great success. Most recently, we can mention it a little bit. You could probably see some things about it on LinkedIn. But recently over in Spain, there was a full-scale bus test that took place using F500 as the extinguishing agent. And they had some really, really great results of being able to extinguish that full-scale bus. So again, we're kind of waiting for all of the reports to come in before we actually start going out and putting out some additional information. But again, just something to watch for. We hope to start releasing some more detailed information on that full-scale bus fire using the F500 to extinguish it very soon. The next question from Greg is, does it require special proportioning valves? F500 will work with all of the current foam proportioning devices that you currently have. It doesn't require anything special. So if you've got the self-educting, large diameter monitor type nozzles that have the educting tubes, or you've got portioning equipment or whatever might have at your facility, in most cases we do work with it. The only thing that I will say is that if you do have a tank type control foam system that is protecting, we can't just remove the AFFF foam or the foam out of the tank and then replace it with F500. That we can't do. We would have to look at and more than likely replace that tank and go into a complete new tank type system. But I would recommend, rather than going back to a tank, looking at what we call our diamond doser, which is a water-driven proportioner. In most cases now, with the prices of steel and things like that, the diamond doser water-driven proportioner system could be more economical. F500 extinguisher, yes, it is available. We do sell fire extinguishers. It is available. So again, feel free to contact for more information your local distributor or HCT, and we can get you in contact with your local distributor so we can help you find an extinguisher, get pricing on an extinguisher. Henrik, thank you for that input. Glad to see that you're doing some training over there in Sweden with the F500, and your testing is showing some good results. That's some really good input, and I hope that others see that as well. Again, our whole point of this training is to get people to look. It's the 21st century. There's a product out here that's again designed for 21st century hazards. Let's move forward, and think about it. How do we test foam? Don't we test foam indoors under ideal conditions? How many of these fires, are we dealing with indoors under ideal conditions? We've often said, why aren't we doing performance-based testing? Why aren't we moving the test outdoors, setting up sprinklers to create rain or fans to create wind? Why aren't we doing performance-based testing for agents that are going to be used in our some of our worst case fires. It doesn't make sense to me. But again, it's the way we're going. So please, by all means, Henrik, thank you for that, sharing your experiences. Again, would love to set up a Teams meeting with you and do some more discussion and learn more about what you're doing there. I think it's great. And if you anything you can share with us, please, we'll look forward to it. Yes, F500 can. Again, we do have many case histories, Greg, of extinguishing lithium-ion batteries. If you go to our HCT website, www.hct-world.com, you will see on there a portion that discusses lithium-ion batteries. Please click on that. As you scroll down through, you will see a link that will take you to basically a list or a file. Well, there it is right there. It's the chronology of testing. Heather, thank you. It's the chronology of testing of F500 on the lithium-ion hazards. And by all means, we can sit there and we can put and show you all about the testing that's taken place with F500. And we've asked to share the information here. Let me go to that's the wrong way. There's our contact information. Again, my name is Jeff Bonkoski. So if you want to go for info at HCT, if you want to get a hold of me, feel free. Just let them know. They'll put me in contact with you. But again, our chronology of testing, Heather's put that link up here into the chat. If you click on that, it'll take you to the chronology. The red boxes that you'll see, if you click on those red boxes, it will take you to the actual report, so that you can sit there, you can feel free to look at and see all of the testing that's been done with some really good success. So with that, again, Heather, thank you. We've got the information there, the link for contacts. So I want to thank everybody. It's been great. I've seen some really great questions. If after we leave, there's a question that comes to mind, please don't let it just sit there. If a question comes up or you're talking to a coworker or somebody, and a question comes up, contact us, please. As I said, we're more than happy to sit down and do a lunch and learn, set up another meeting with your organization, your group. Our whole thing is we want to make sure that we educate people out here on how this product works and how it can help basically save the environment and to help keep things safe as far as plants, employees, etc. So with that, again, thank you all. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, morning, evening, whatever the case may be from where you're joining us. It's been great. It's been my pleasure. God bless and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.